Well, look, firstly, I think it's good news that the Prime Minister was here in Davos, engaging with political leaders, speaking to business leaders, and setting out that actually the UK will continue being active in global trade. It's important to reassure political leaders and business leaders that London and the UK will carry on being open for business. And my job as the Mayor of London is to continue putting pressure on the Prime Minister to make sure we get a good deal with the European Union when it comes to us leaving the EU. At the moment, I'm not on the same page as the Prime Minister. I'm quite clear that whilst we respect the results of the referendum, the British public voted to leave the EU, to leave the structures and to leave the legal institutions. What the British public didn't do was to vote to make us poorer. And so I'm saying to the Prime Minister, a key priority for her must be privileged access to a single market. We've got to continue being a city and country that attracts talent. So when it comes to negotiating with the EU, what we can't afford to have is a so-called hard Brexit. A hard Brexit will cause huge damage to London, to the country and to the EU. The concerns I have expressed to me from business leaders is that if there is a so-called hard Brexit, it could lead to businesses leaving London. And what I say to my friends in Europe is, if businesses leave London, there's no guarantee they're going to go to Paris, Berlin, Frankfurt, Madrid. The reality is they may well end up going to Hong Kong or Singapore or other parts of the world. So a so-called hard Brexit is bad news for London, the UK and Europe. It's a lose-lose. And so, over the last 7 months, the good news we've got is Google, Apple, Facebook, Snapchat, other really good companies are expanding their presence in London. But clearly over the last 24 to 48 hours, you've got some banks expressing concern if the negotiations don't turn out the way we need them to. Oh look, there are friends across the European Union who want London and the UK to do well. But the reality is, what they won't accept is a cherry picking of the best parts of a relationship with the EU. That's why we need to have a meeting of all sides to make sure there's a good deal coming from our Brexit. That means, as far as I'm concerned, privileged access to a single market. That means, as far as I'm concerned, the ability to attract talent. And that's why it's important the Prime Minister and the UK government understands the importance of the EU to British businesses. What I'd say to political leaders, business leaders around the world is very simple. London has been a place where people have done trade for more than 1,000 years. People have come to London with ideas for more than 1,000 years. That's not going to change. The key thing is to make sure the deal we do with the EU benefits London, the country, and ultimately the EU. American businesses have been in the UK for decades. Americans have lived in London and the UK for decades. I don't want that to change, and that's why it's important the Prime Minister does a deal with the EU that benefits British businesses, benefits American businesses, and ultimately benefits all of us. This is my first Davos, and over the last 24 hours I've met with political leaders, business leaders, chief executives, innovators, and what's clear to me is that they want to make sure that London and the UK prospers after Brexit negotiations have concluded. Those who are in London don't want to leave London. They love being in London. They love the fact that we're the economic capital of Europe. They love the fact that we're the tech capital. They love the fact we're the cultural capital of the world. And the Prime Minister needs to ensure that when it comes to the negotiations with the EU, we don't damage the ecosystem we have in London and the UK. There is a huge affinity, love, affection for London and the UK from business leaders I've been speaking over the last 24 hours. I want to bottle that up and use that to persuade my Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, to ensure the deal we do with the EU benefits all of us. My understanding is that the Prime Minister intends to serve notice to quit, Article 50 notice, in March of this year, in 2 months' time. The most optimistic experts think it will take at least 2 years to conclude Brexit negotiations. It could take up to 5 years. The key thing is to reassure businesses in the meantime that we'll continue to ensure we've got privileged access to a single market. We'll continue to be able to attract talent, because what we don't want is in the meantime businesses making decisions to leave London.